Hey, what's up guys, JayzTwoCents here, and you know, I've always lived by it's better to be late than never. And considering every other tech YouTuber's already done their Skylake video, I figure it's time to go ahead and do mine.
Massdrop is excited to announce 3 new communities: RC cars, photography, and Corvettes. Be the first to know when these communities officially hit the site by subscribing using the links below.
Okay, so I'm gonna have a small series coming up here about Skylake where I'm going to be doing the build here, which this is gonna be kind of a build overview. I'm showing you the parts, telling you the parts I've chosen for this Skylake build. And then I'm gonna tell you what I have planned in the future for giving you as much Skylake content as I can to be relevant to your builds. I'm getting a lot of questions about, should I go with Skylake or should I go with 4790K? Is it worth going DDR4? And we'll kind of do some comparisons here. Now here are the parts that we have chosen for Skylake. Now obviously I've gone with the Core i7 6700K because that's what Intel sent. Now what's interesting about this box is I want you guys to realize that this is a retail sample, not one of those handwritten classified samples, which always leave us wondering a little bit, you know, whether or not Intel kind of handpicked that and sent it over. This is actually off a retail shelf, and it's in retail packaging, and it's probably a little bit closer to being more realistic as to what you guys would get if you went into, say, Fry's or Micro Center or bought one from Newegg. So I prefer to do retail samples when it comes to CPUs, which I've always done in the past, rather than doing the, you know, classified, hand-picked style CPU, which is sent over by engineering. Anyway, for the motherboard, I went with the EVGA Z170 for the win. And you guys know why I chose this motherboard if you're following on Twitter. And if you're not following on Twitter, you should be, because you would already know the answer to why I'm using this motherboard. And it's not just because I'm a little bit of a horror for when it comes to EVGA, with that being one of my favorite brands. Honestly, it comes down to the fact that it's pretty much all black. There's a little bit of accent color in there, but I am personally sick and tired of all the flashy, gaudy, ugly colors that a lot of the brands are doing out there. I'm not a fan, believe it or not, of yellow and black motherboards or white motherboards, or just, it's almost like Asus, ASRock, Gigabyte, MSI, they're all in this race for who can make the biggest, ugliest, flashiest motherboard, and that's not what I like. So the EVGA Z170 for the win really fit the bill in terms of features and the fact that it's a standard ATX board, because we are using the S340 NZXT Razer Edition case. Now for cooling, I'm using the Corsair H100i, honestly, because it's just available and I have it. I've got some other needs for my Predator, and then because I'm gonna be orienting it on the front and not on the top of the case, because this case only has 120 millimeter single fan exhaust on the top, that's why I'm not using the H220X or anything like that, because I don't want to orient that all sideways. So this is going to be front mounted on the front of this case. For graphics cards here, I'm using my GTX 970s. These are EVGA SSC editions. They get a little bit of blue accenting right here, but when they're in the case like this, there's silver right here on the front, so the blue's not going to show. I went with 2 of them simply because I have 2 of them, so why not? But some of my future plans, once this system is all together, is to kind of swap out the graphics cards with things like the Titan X or some massively overclocked cards and start to see if we can get any bottlenecking when it comes to the 6700K. I highly doubt it when it comes to gaming, but it's something we'll check for in the future. Now for RAM, I'm running 16 gigabytes, 4 gigabyte sticks of HyperX Predator. Now it's not ideal to be using 4 sticks if we're gonna be doing overclocking. I'd prefer 2 sticks of 8 gigabyte, but I don't have 2 sticks of 8 gigabytes. I have 4 gigabytes. So that's what we'll be doing there. And then when it comes to storage, I've just got my 4 terabyte Western Digital Black. And then for main drive, I'll be using 500 gigabyte SSD Evo. Other than that, we're gonna go ahead and put it all together, and then we'll come back and we'll just take a look, kind of a tour of the system, and then we'll run down what we'll be doing in the future with some future videos regarding Skylake.
Transition.
All right, obviously it's the next day because I spent a lot of time working on this build yesterday. Came across a few snags that I want to talk about right now. I just realized I look awfully preppy, don't I? I think it's a nice shirt. It's a nice shade of blue. Okay, so building in the NZXT S340. I mean, that's really what this is. It's got a few Razer logos on there and some underglow under the case and a glowing logo on the front. But in all intents and purposes, it is an NZXT S340. Now, building in this case was actually not that bad, considering it's a mid-tower. It fits a full ATX board in there, or micro ATX if you want a little bit more room. You can fit a 240 radiator on the front, as we did here with the H100i. And I'll be honest, the only real reason I went with the H100i is because I can change the pump LED to green. I mean, I really kind of wanted this to be a very green-themed build, especially since I'm gonna be moving Skunkworks over to a green build. I thought, well, let's kind of get a dry run here of how green would look, and I really like it. Obviously, we changed out the graphics card, and I didn't put my Titan-X in there simply because I wanted to put in a Titan-X. It turns out that the two 970s on this motherboard gave me a little bit of an issue, and here's as to why. The EVGA Z170 for the win does not have any PLX chip on there whatsoever, which means we are limited to only the native PCI Express lanes. Now, the problem with that is I went ahead and added into this mix-up here. I didn't feel like reinstalling all of the OS and starting all over. So what I did was I took the M.2 SSD out of my simulator build, my computer I built simply for my racing sim, and it already had the OS and everything installed on it. So I just took that out, put it on this motherboard, as you can see down there underneath the graphics card. And the problem is M.2 also utilizes PCI Express lanes. Now, there's more than enough lanes to be able to use the SSD on there, or the M.2 SSD, and still go with SLI. The problem is EVGA has it set up so that you have to use the top two PCI Express slots for SLI and not 1 and 3. So 1 and 2 puts the graphics card sandwiched together. Now, considering the 970s that I have are not blower style cards, they are recirculating cards, means that the top card was going to be completely starved of air. Not only that, it looked terrible. The other issue I came across when doing this build is the fact that for whatever reason, don't ask me why, but for whatever reason, EVGA decided to omit every single USB 2.0 header on the motherboard. There are no USB 2.0 headers. Now, the reason why that bothers me, and that's a big deal, is one, using Corsair Link with the H100i uses a USB 2.0 header where you plug the header onto the motherboard and then you control the pump. That's not that huge of a deal with the H100i, considering you can plug in a standard USB, mini USB plug it into the back of the motherboard into one of those USB ports, and everything will work fine. You could set it up and then unplug it and not worry about it again. The other problem was I wanted to try out NZXT's new Hue Plus lighting system, which they sent over, and I thought that this would be the perfect build where I could balance out the lighting and play around with the RGB effects. Unfortunately, that also uses a USB 2.0 header. Now, yes, I put that out on Twitter and everyone was like,
Just get a USB to 3.0 adapter, or 2.0 to 3.0 adapter.
Then I can't use the USB 3.0 plug for the front of the case, which means that the USB plugs on the ports on the front of the case, or technically the top, would have been rendered useless. Now, what I'm getting at here was my need of an all-black motherboard led to some compromises that I'm not too happy about, especially getting rid of the USB 2.0 headers. In my opinion, it would make more sense to ditch the front side audio than it would be to ditch the USB 2.0, because there's lots of cases that still have USB 2.0 headers on the front of the case. Fractal Design being one of them. They've typically will put two USB 3.0 and two USB 2.0 on there. I feel like there's a lot of compromises on this motherboard that don't make sense. And had I known all that going into it, I might have just gotten a different motherboard and then modded it to be black. That's why the Titan-X is in there, although it does match aesthetically. Now, I still could technically do my 970s and SLI and not have to worry about the M.2. If I was to simply clone the M.2 partition onto my Samsung SSD, then I would be able to take the M.2 off the motherboard, free up those lanes, and then be able to use the proper separation for the 970s like I would need to do SLI. But then, once again, I'm making a compromise of going with a slower drive, because we all know M.2 on the motherboard is way faster than going through say the 6 gigabit per second port and an SSD. I would much rather use the M.2 as my operating system partition and drive because it's just natively so much faster than SATA 6 gigabit. But ultimately, so far dealing with Skylake has been pretty simple. I don't know if I got a really good overclocking chip. I started playing around with some of the overclocking. We'll do another video about Skylake overclocking because right now I just did a down and dirty overclock on this thing. I just bumped up the multiplier. I put the RAM at XMP profile 1, so the RAM is running at 2800 megahertz right now, and my CPU is actually running at 4.9 gigahertz right now. And I didn't even try and tune the thing. It probably is pumping more voltage into it than it really needs, although the temperatures have been sitting under load right around the mid 80s, and then at idle it tends to sit somewhere closer around to the low 30s, and then at stock speeds it's like mid 20s. So the H100i is doing a fantastic job in here. But anyway, I don't even have a name for this build. I honestly don't even know if this build is gonna stay together, but I had to put something together to test out Skylake for you guys, and I thought, well, NZXT sent this case over a while ago. I might as well at least try it out, see how it looks. I'm happy with the S340. It's a very well thought out case for the size. I mean, I love the fact that you've got separation of the power supply unit, so none of that heat is making its way into the main compartment of the case. I like where the SSDs mount, because SSDs look really cool these days, and so a lot of people definitely like to show off their SSDs, especially if they match in some way. But all in all, I'm pretty impressed with the NZXT S340. It's got a lot of thought put into this mid-tower case. I mean, you can fit a 240 rad on the front, a 30 millimeter rad, including the thickness of the fan. So you've got about 55 millimeters of clearance there. If you remove the bracket that you can install the pump on, if you don't need that, then you could go with a thicker radiator, no problem, all the way up to like a 60 millimeter, not have any problems in there. Full ATX size motherboard, no top mounted radiators though, those aren't going to fit in there, not enough clearance between the fan and the motherboard, but you could also technically go with a rear mounted radiator on there if you wanted for like a single 120 AIO. Separation of the power supply so you're not getting any contamination of heat into the main compartment. You can show off your SSDs, and that it even includes a bracket to mount your reservoir too, which is usually the more difficult part when it comes to new water coolers because they don't want to drill into their case. So they've already got a spot there for you. I am using the BitPhoenix Alchemy lighting in there, which is actually a magnetic lighting strip, so that's what's giving me the green right there. As you can see here, actually I can't get it off. There we go. This thing's just magnetic on there. So that makes it nice and easy. If you're not using an aluminum case, then it will stick to it, no problems. But anyway, we've got a few videos coming up that I'm gonna do. We're gonna do a Skylake overclocking tutorial and guide. We are going to also use this case because I saw an awful lot of comments of people who claim to be in the know saying,
oh my God, you can't put a front-mounted radiator on that case. You're gonna heat up your components and everything's gonna explode and the world's gonna completely be destroyed as far as we know it.
That's not true.
and actually we'll support that with some numbers, where temperatures can be affected a little bit, but trust me, they're not gonna be affected nearly as much as you think they're going to be. Anyway, we're gonna get out of here. Help me think of a name for this project. Head on over to Twitter at JayzTwoCents and tell me what you think I should call it. Or if you don't use Twitter, then just put it down in the comments, and whatever name we choose, if I choose your name, then maybe I'll give you a shout out. But anyway, guys, thanks for looking at this little build here. All in all, I'm actually pretty happy with the way it turned out. I even went with my K70 RGB and made it green so that we can be all like metrosexual and matchy and stuff. Anyway, time to get out of here, guys. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.